What if heterosexuality was not innate, but enforced and expected? What if sexual orientation was not immutable but could change? What if women could opt out of heterosexuality and choose to be lesbians? If any of this was possible, what would you choose? Hello, I am Angela Wild, and this is I Wish I Was a Lesbian, a channel where we explore women's lives from a lesbian feminist perspective. And we are asking all the difficult but unavoidable questions that no one else dares to ask. This channel is held by myself alongside Michelle Kerwin and Tabata Spinster, and we give a platform to women who have left heterosexuality and believe that an alternative lesbian life is possible. No, leaving men does not mean you have to give up on relationship, intimacy, or sex. In fact, in a world where men teach each other how to rape us and get away with it, what if women choosing women as romantic and sexual partners was the best, most efficient way forward towards a global women's liberation as well as personal fulfillment? So for the next few sessions, I will be interviewing some of the contributors of the book I Wish I Was a Lesbian, Women's Lives Beyond Heterosexuality, which is here, released May 26 at Spinif Express. And some of the interview you'll be able to find on YouTube, Spotify, or Substack under the name I Wish I Was a Lesbian. There's a complete list under this video. And to all the women who've ever written in despair, I wish I was a lesbian, but I can't be one, this space is for you. Don't forget to like and to subscribe. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about sexuality, feminism, anti-racism and anti-colonialism, and choice. And I'm delighted to welcome Daniela Medina. Hello, Daniela.
Hi.
Daniela is a gender non-conforming lesbian of color. She's in her 20s. She's an anti-colonialist, anti-speciesist, lesbo-feminist philosopher who makes compost, that was from your biography, and also likes to think about other possible words. So what an introduction. Welcome to the show, Daniela. I want to start by asking you to introduce yourself, maybe to tell us a little bit more about what you would like people to know, women to know about you before we start chatting.
Well, my name is Daniela. I am 26. And well, as you said, I'm a philosopher and I like to write and read a lot. Also, a very important part of my life is anti-speciesism slash veganism, and also basically being among lesbians and women, but especially lesbians and animals, of course. And that's pretty much it. Basically, women and animals are the most important thing in my life.
So what is the
And
word that you said before? I'm also what?
um,
Quiz?
I don't know. I just said that I like the most important thing in my life are women and animals, and that veganism slash anti-speciesism is a really important thing in my life as well. And that's it, I guess.
So we run a platform, and the book was really international. So could you tell us where you're from, when you live?
Yes, of course. I am from Mexico City, from Mexico. And I mean, I do live in Mexico City, but I live pretty much in the outside part, which, like, what I mean by that is that where I live is um connected to basically the outer part of the city, which is the Estado de Mexico, which is like even though it's pretty close to Mexico City, it's pretty much ignored and transportation is horrible. And basically all the people from there have to go work and live in Mexico City.
Mhm.
So even though I still live in Mexico City, it's in pretty much the outer part, which has a lot of political consequences. We don't have water and all of these horrible things. So it's it's curious because I do live in Mexico City, but I don't feel
Mhm.
like I'm part of Mexico City. So yes, I mean, we also, like, lesbians from here also think and read and write a lot about living not in Mexico City or not in the center of Mexico City, which, has a big impact on your life, your childhood, your work, because sometimes you have to spend all your days in the center of the city and then you go back to your house pretty much to sleep.
Mhm.
So that's where I live. I do live in Mexico City, but in the outer part.
But I wanted to go back also to a term that you used in your biography in the book, where you
Mhm.
mention what we will call the American continent. Um,
Yes.
there is a word for that that I had never heard before, and I would really like if you could explain to the audience what it is and where it's come from.
Yes. Abya Yala. So basically, that word, well, those two words refer to what we know right now as the American territory. It is an indigenous word, which right now it's used by, of course, indigenous people, but also um, feminists who are anti-racist and basically people who, have uh, this critical analysis of how the world is seen because, um, of course, indigenous people had their own name for the territory that we now know as America and Mexico and so on. So pretty much it is an indigenous term for the territory that we now know as Latin America.
Okay. And the
And of course,
rejection,
there's a
uh,
story. Sorry.
and the rejection of the term America, because yes,
Exactly. Exactly. It's more like reappropriating um the territory that we live in, but in our own terms.
yes. Okay. But thank you so much
Mhm.
for explaining. I was very curious about it, and I'm really glad that we are you're using that term, and I'm really glad I know about it. So, just a little point about your path to feminism. So you've already explained what matters to you. How did you get to feminism and to lesbian feminism? So in a few words, because we're gonna go back into it later.
Yes. So I heard about feminism when I was about 15 years old, but like the 2010s were, I would say, a strange time for feminism because everything was like mixed up in a sense. There was not that strong division that we make right now, like as radical feminism or liberal feminism. There was just feminism, and then I was also there was a part of my life where I was involved in anarchist groups as well, and feminism was talked about as well. But then I got to know lesbo-feminism and radical feminism when I would say in college, I think, and it was through the internet as well. And then I got closer to lesbian feminist groups, and that was it. I joined discussion groups, and that's where everything started, basically.
Okay. So I'd like to start our discussion with a kind of a global trend. Um, I think, I mean, actually, I want to ask you if that's the same, but what we see a lot in the West, and that is been colonized in my mind in so many ways, is that a lot of women are choosing to live relationship with men. So, post 4B, if you want.
Mhm,
And some of the headlines frame this as a growing trend. There's all this statistic, 35% of women will be single and child-free by
mhm.
2030. Patriarchy is worried. What do you think of this shift? Is this something happening in Mexico? Yeah. How do you understand
It,
this?
I've seen that. I think it was this magazine. I would be lying if I say this as a fact, but I think it was Vogue who had this article that was called like having a boyfriend is boring or something
Was
along those
involved,
lines.
yeah. Yeah.
And it was pretty interesting because I do think that uh, women are really like rejecting men in a way, but also there's, I would say it's not very popular because we're also seeing um, strong comeback of uh, like the traditional family and so on. So I would say yes, but I don't think it has like the political power it should. I mean, it's not being thought as, a way to live your life, or, it's not like, okay, what happens next when you
Mhm.
reject men? Okay, that's one thing, but then what are you going to do afterwards? Because if you think yourself as an heterosexual woman that is going to be rejecting men for the rest of your life, then okay, but you are not thinking yourself in a community of other women. You're just like, okay, I have to deal with this attraction to men for the rest of my life. And but I don't like them, so I'm going to be alone. And of course that's isolating, and of course that can be frustrating, because like it's not like you don't deserve to have a relationship, or like a family. I'm not like I don't like that word a lot, but it's not like you don't deserve like to have a family or like friends or anything like that. It's just that you are only rejecting men, but you're not proposing an alternative to that. Or like, yes, I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I just think that it's a very superficial perspective, and of course that can make women feel alone and isolated.
Do you
There's things that you can do with that, but
mm,
what happens when you reject men?
do you feel like perhaps this first step, I also see it as a first step, which is why the book exists, but do you think that perhaps the first step is only a first step because women cannot see? Instead of kind of proposing an alternative, they may not see that they have an alternative.
Yeah, I do think it's because, of course, I would say that heterosexuality as a political regime is not a popular topic. It's known in the feminist communities, but it's not like if you ask a woman, she's going to know about it immediately.
Mhm.
So I do think it's because, of course, heterosexuality and the patriarchy are doing their job, and they invisibilize other ways of
Mhm.
living. So, of course, yes.
Yes, for sure. Um, there is a lot of discussion about, I think what I find interesting, even though, yes, it is, as you say, a first step, and I hope not too superficial, but we'll see. All this discussion about decentering men, which I find really interesting, and women discussing online about their experience of heterosexuality,
Mhm.
how dissatisfactory it is. So I think this kind of consciousness, like really weird, spontaneous social media consciousness raising sessions that are happening on TikTok, like unexpectedly. They fascinate me. And you write a little bit in your essay about your experience of heterosexuality. And would you care to tell us a little bit about what it was like, or to tell us about compulsory heterosexuality, whatever you feel comfortable with?
Yes, of course. Well, one thing I don't know, because of course it's my personal experience, but I did realize a really young age that I was, just attracted to women. So, um, that was like I knew that. I of course I didn't think about it like in depth, but I knew that. Uh, and this other thing that I'm going to talk about, I've noticed that it has happened to many lesbians. Like, that you like women or enjoy being around women, and you're like attracted to women in general, but you are still trying to make things work with men, and you feel like you're trapped in this never-ending circle of, I just feel like this is not enough, and I just feel unhappy. But since you are already trying with men, then it's like, okay, then I must be attracted to them, or then there must be something that is, like attaching me to them. So then I cannot be a lesbian. And it happened to me, but I've seen that this happened to many other women, that they're like, I mean, I like him. He's funny and he's charming and all of this positive things about the current boyfriend they have. But at the same time, there's something that, I mean, the fact that the boyfriend, the current boyfriend, is a good guy doesn't eliminate the fact that there's a system protecting men and giving them things that you will never have.
Mhm.
So that, of course, leads to the fact that there is never going to exist an equal relationship when you're with men. Never. So, of course, there was me having this feeling of this is not enough. And then it came this other perspective of feminism saying like there's no such thing as an equal relationship with a man, especially in a romantic relationship. And that was like, oh, okay, so then heterosexuality and attraction to men, it's not just something that exists, but something that is um, something that you have to feel. Otherwise, you're going to be expelled from society. Maybe not like that strongly, but in many ways, you're going to be expelled from society.
Mm.
So it was both things, like like it was pure. I mean, I don't know if this is the correct word, but it was like my instinct telling me that I could never be happy with a man, because I even when I was a teenager, I would think, and I would yeah, I would imagine myself marrying a man, and I felt horrified. Like I was so afraid of me being married to a man, and that was like, okay, maybe I should listen more to what I am truly feeling. And also, there are so many women telling me that this is not normal for you to feel, and this unsatisfaction is not something that you're individually feeling, but also connected to a much bigger system that at that moment I was not realizing. So it was a combination of those both things.
Yeah, you say you didn't realize it, but yet still you could see the inequality.
Mhm,
And so I think at some level
mhm.
you had some awareness that it was beyond the individual, which is fascinating at such a young age. Um, so you would say what put you in heterosexuality was what we call compulsory heterosexuality, like all this system that makes women comply. Can you explain what compulsory heterosexuality means? How do you understand it?
Compulsory heterosexuality is the base of patriarchy, because um, as we know, men want to control everything, and uh, want to also, like when they control everything, they destroy everything, and they don't care much about what happens to the world or to women or to children and so on. Um, and women know that. So it like compulsory heterosexuality is really interesting, because patriarchy was like, okay, like in very simple words, men are going to be horrible. So how are we going to make women still want to be with them? How are they going to be um, changing diapers and washing the laundry and doing the dishes? How are we going to do that? So that's when compulsory heterosexuality comes into play,
Hmm.
because if you're if you're only a girl and you're constantly told like it doesn't matter if you don't want to do this, or if other boys are hitting you and pulling your hair, it's because they like you and it's because they want to be with you. And then if then when you get older, it's like, yeah, of course he's jealous, and he's being this violent because he wants to protect you, and it doesn't matter if if you feel uncomfortable, that's how love is, and that's how it's supposed to be, and men are going to protect you. And yeah, of course, it doesn't matter if you don't have a career of your own, because at the end, he is going to protect you.
Mhm.
And it it works in very, um in very undercover ways that you don't realize. So it's pretty much the base of the patriarchy. Otherwise, women know that men do all of these things, but they don't know how to name it. It's like
Yeah.
boys will be boys in a way.
And I feel like now maybe the understanding is kind of reaching a more global level, I hope. But yeah,
Mhm.
what do you say? Because you had the awareness of being attracted to women when you were young. There's a lot of women who don't have that early.
Mhm.
And would you say that compulsory heterosexuality also affects them, or just lesbians, just women who are already attracted to women or are aware of their attraction?
No, it affects um, every woman. Um, I do think that right now compulsory heterosexuality, it's seen as something that only affects lesbian. It's like there is real heterosexuality and there is compulsory heterosexuality, but there is no such thing as real heterosexuality. Because if you think about it, what are really women attracted to?
Mhm.
Like, what are like really what's behind that attraction to many if they have to deal with all of these things. Of course, it's a really complex debate even within lesbians, because I know that not all of us agree with compulsory heterosexuality and the way it affects all women, but I would say it affects all women, and there is no such thing as being naturally heterosexual.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you, and I feel like the early theorization of compulsory heterosexuality was really to understand what you described, that it was
Mhm.
affecting every woman. And what I read now in the current narrative in social media is that yes, only lesbians are affected by it. How I understand is that it looks like only lesbians are affected by it because lesbians are the only one who's managing to come out of it somehow.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is something that affects
Mhm.
every woman to ensure that men have access to us and our labor and so on. Yes. Um, in that case, you say there is no real heterosexuality. And how, what do you mean by that? Because obviously, you know,
Mhm.
the obvious response that we get when we say that is, duh, but you know,
Mhm.
if there's no heterosexuality, there will be no more human. You know, the human race is going to go extinct. So of course there is some real heterosexuality. How do you respond to this kind of you know, critique?
Um, I've seen that some people say that um, there is science behind innate sexual orientations, and there's like they do think that there's this strong backup of heterosexuality being natural, but I would say that because of course when I noticed that I was like, okay, let's see those papers, those that science that it's mentioned so early. And actually what I found is that scientists also say that there is a mix of both. I don't agree with that. I'm just saying that that's what I found in what science says. It's both a combination of genetics, but also there's a social aspect to it. And also, at some point, even within the LGBTQ community, there was this ongoing discussion of sexual orientations not being something you're born with. And I read about it in, I don't remember which Sheila Jeffries' book was it. I don't remember, but um, yes, basically what she says it's that I think it was around the 80s that it was topic that the LGBTQ community would talk about. And it was like, okay, yes, we are not heterosexuals, but what like what's behind it? Is it really innate? Is it something that you, I don't know, you develop with the age and things like that? And at some point that conversation was completely banned, and right now um you cannot even mention it within those communities. It's
Yes.
like, no, you're a homophobe and you're saying that, because of course it's in their head, and in, of course, in like among society, it's like, of course, if you think that, then you agree with conversion therapy and all of that. But of course it's not the same, because why would we think that if we are, if our perspective is more of like, okay, patriarchy is doing all of this and women are obligated to do all of this, so what's the reason behind it? it's it's more related to something that we think as a component of women's liberation,
Mhm.
and of course it's not the same. So um
So
yes, I mean,
we,
it's
on one
that's
hand,
what I would say.
I'm trying to summarize what you said. So on one hand, you've got patriarchy enforcing something, while
Hmm.
really what we are saying is no, what we're doing is liberating you from
Hmm.
that enforcement. I mean, I've never
Hmm.
seen a political lesbian enforcing anything. What I've seen is
Yeah,
asking questions and, yeah, challenging, but, as if also, it's really funny, but do we have any structural power to enforce anything, even if we want?
exactly.
We do not have that.
Hmm.
I think that if more women were lesbians, and if indeed heterosexuality as an institution was not a natural and innate, that the human race would be extinct. And I think, as somebody who's close to nature, and the future of the earth is probably a question you have stuff to say about.
Hmm. I would, to if someone told me that, I would respond, what is that, what is the big concern about that? It's not like, because they say that as if all women are going to become lesbians like tomorrow or something like that. And also, the thing is that even if we, of course, human, the human species is very different from all the other species. Not because we are superior or anything, we're just different. But even if we look at other animals, we see that there is, it's not like animals are living in heterosexual couples and sharing their lives together. Of course, in some instances, but not always. And I mean, it's interesting for me to see how, like, the real concern that people have about like destroying family and society as we know, because um also there's this book, Lesbian Origins,
Yes.
and it's by Susan Kevin. So basically she says that the beginning of society, of course, there was reproduction, but it was not like men and women were living together, as families and everything. They were living their lives separately. Of course, reproduction existed, and because, of course, we're here, we're still here after all of these years, and um, of course, there was reproduction, but there was not a there was not a society, a heterosexual society. And I would say that reproduction could still exist, but not in the way you're thinking. And it's not necessary for humans to still exist. It's not necessary for humans to still exist and have this heterosexual idea of society. So human can still exist. The human species can still exist, but not like that, especially not at the expense of women.
Yes, I think what I'm hearing and what you're saying is there's a biological element that yes, some heterosexuality must happen. However, coupling
Mhm.
It's not necessary. A whole life
Mhm.
built around this institution is not necessary. Yeah, I agree with you. Great book, by the way. We'll put it in the comments.
Yes.
Um, so, in short, I mean, that's my next question. Do you think political lesbianism, like the ideas around it, are still relevant for women today? Could young women benefit from them?
Yes, definitely. Because I think that when you're young is more when you're most vulnerable. I mean, women are always vulnerable to misogynistic violence, but I think when you're young is when you are really more focused on romantic love and all of these expectations of starting to have relationships. And if you or if young women and teenagers and even girls at some extent could like be taught, of course, in other terms, that they don't have to be with men if they don't want to. It could be a life-changing experience.
So now we're going to go a little bit broader. And for many reasons, when I started thinking about the book, I mean, one of the aims was really to actively include very diverse contribution in terms of age, in terms of the geographical regions, class, ethnic background. It was important because I wanted to show that women across the board were resonating with these ideas. I wanted to show that it was not, as you say, just a Western idea. I think, the idea is that if something is good for us, you will find women everywhere spontaneously using
Hmm.
it. Or when they come across it, they'll be like, oh, yeah, yes, I'll do that. That's cool. So, do you believe that the idea of political lesbianism can speak to women across different social and cultural contexts or background or, like around the world and why?
I would say yes, because even though patriarchy is different in every part of the world, it doesn't eliminate the fact that patriarchy exists and that men are the ones who have the power. So I would say it would be different for every woman, even I would say in women in the same territory, it's different because like social class and race and everything. But I would say that women all around the world deserve to have a life of their own and to build with other people that see them as equals. That means other women. And so yes, I would say it's beneficial for everyone. And because at the end of the day, if you can't have an equal relationship with your partner, I don't think you should be having a relationship with that person anyway. So that means with men.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah, it's a
so
crucial
yes.
point. A lot of women raised that, and I agree. It was also an eye opener for me. If I can't be equal, why am I here? Um,
Mhm.
and so to carry on that, and to go beyond the Western-centric focus that is often, happening, at least in English-speaking places. I first heard the term lesbo-feminism while working on this book, while speaking to you, but also altogether there's three Mexican contributor in the book, which was very exciting. So really, I want to help share the knowledge about this Mexican women's movement. What is lesbo-feminism? I think maybe it's a little bit difficult to access because it's written in Spanish if you don't speak or read Spanish, and I don't. But could you tell us a bit, maybe to start off with, about Mexico? I know you mentioned a little bit about living in Mexico City or in the outskirts, but what is the situation of women in Mexico? What is it that we need to know? What is it like?
Well, it's pretty much horrible. I don't know if this is a known fact, a fact, a popular fact, but the term femicide was created in Mexico. And so lately it's been getting worse, especially since the 90s, I would say. In the 90s, it's when basically the femicides started to be like more. It was in the 90s when it started, and then right after the 90s, the term femicide was created, and ever since it has gotten worse and worse. Um, Basically, which with each decade, and
I mean, the number of
um,
men killed by men because they are women. Yeah,
exactly,
higher and higher. Okay.
exactly, yes, yes. It's been like 7 per day, and then it 9, and then I don't know. Honestly, right now, I don't know what the number is anymore. But um, yes, it's horrible. It's like we get harassed on the streets. I mean, not me anymore because of how I present, but that doesn't remove all of the other things I do go through. But it's it's pretty much really dangerous. But at the same time, it's it's not like it's horrible all the time. We get to do a lot of things as well. I'm not saying this like yes, we have advantages. Not like we can do a lot of things. It's not like it's horrible all the time, but I would say it's like the word femicide being created in Mexico says a lot, and also for lesbians is pretty much horrible as well. Um, what happens is that, of course, we're not taking seriously, like the general aspects of lesbophobia. And when you go out and you look differently and you get called all of these names, which actually when I started to experience lesbophobia when I was like 13, which is crazy. Um, and but especially for lesbians, yes, it's pretty much like people don't accept lesbians. They don't see us as equals. One pretty common experience is in public transportation. There is this special part in the subway, which is only designated to women. When lesbians as me, like gender non-conforming lesbians, we go in there. Sometimes they try to kick us out, and we don't feel as comfortable as we should.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, even if like same-sex marriage is now legalized, I don't think that's really relevant in our daily lives. So it's a mixed you
Mm.
know thing. It's not horrible all the time, but at the same time it is,
So
because our daily lives are affected every day. So yes.
would you say that, I mean, it's really striking that you get kicked out of women-only carriages, that they perceive you as a man or they perceive you as a trans man? Or like what is the rationale behind it? You're not a real woman? Like what are they saying?
Yes, I would say they don't perceive us as we're like some type of strange creature to them. Like we had like a kind of a discussion group with some lesbians that are having this really great project, like doing events for lesbians and everything. And we had a discussion group about this, and we like a lot of us think that they don't see us as women. We are just like something in between, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like, treat us that way. And I've had many experiences especially in public transportation and also at work. I had like a openly discriminatory situation at work, when basically a man told a friend of mine that he didn't like freaks and he didn't like people who dress the opposite sex. So things like that, basically, it's something that we're something in between, and that's why we are disgusting.
Yes, I get it. Well, so what's the response to the misogyny, the violence against women, and anti-lesbianism? Here the question is, yeah, what's the feminist movement, and can you like explain about lesbo-feminism as well?
Well, yes, lesbofeminism is um, basically uh, a, a theory that analyzes, uh, of course, patriarchy, but the way it is intertwined with capitalism, colonialism, racism, and I would also say speciesism. I mean, I wouldn't see it like canonically into the lesbo-feminist discussions, but I would say lately it is. Um, so pretty much what lesbo-feminism says is, of course, there's patriarchy, but the patriarchy wouldn't exist if it wasn't for colonialism and racism and all of these other systems, because the patriarchy needs women in what we know as the third world, working for basically nothing, and like having all of these children who will be later the future workers that are also going to be paid, like almost anything as their mothers. Um, and of course, that all of that work done, both the what we know as domestic work and like productive work, like that division of reproductive and productive work, which is basically that women do reproductive work because they do everything um, that allows people to go to the actual work. They do the cooking, the cleaning, and everything you basically need to be ready to go and work at wherever you work at. So of course that has a component of like women have to be poor, and of course it has to be women of color, and because also even if women of color are being exploited in cities, they're women of color who have their land taken away, and their the nature that they have always lived in taken away. And that allows men to have all of this power, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if it wasn't for racism and colonialism, patriarchy wouldn't be what it is right now. So that's what lesbo-feminism says. You cannot understand patriarchy without all of these other oppression systems.
You don't know how
Um,
refreshing it is for me to hear that. That's what I was really excited about. Like, it's really great that you explain it like that. We are in the UK where I live. I'm French, but I live in the UK. We have really like very scattered movement. I wouldn't say it's one movement, but what I see more and more is women going to what we call single issue feminism. So they will pick one thing.
mhm,
Like, this is it. We need to change the law about that. And there is such a lack of understanding of any system of oppression, let alone how they interact with each other, that it leads to all sorts of very strange alliances or dangerous
yeah,
alliances, even, which is very far from feminism at the end of it. Even if at the beginning maybe there was, a will to make something better, you end up in this situation where you might be doing something good for one very narrow group of women. Even maybe he doesn't even do that, but there is this really clear uh, lack of understanding of all these systems of oppression. And to me, the way you describe it is how feminism should be. I know there's this big, discussion about what intersectionality means, because intersectionality has been used by the trans and the queer lobby
yes,
to mean, inclusive of men. But to me, it always means, well, no, you have to understand how all these aspects work into your life, into the life of someone. What does oppression look like if you have more than one, if you're not just a woman, but you also have, to deal with racism or colorism or classism, like if you're poor, if you're a lesbian, and all that interact with each other. So I'm very grateful that you're talking about this, and I wanted to ask you if you would say that lesbo-feminism has an understanding of sexuality in the same way as like we were discussing. Like, is it something that in lesbo-feminism we understand heterosexuality as being an institution that oppresses women that we can opt out of, or is it not the case?
no, of course it's a really important topic for lesbofeminism to think about heterosexuality as a political institution because of course you have patriarchy with colonialism and racism, but also like how are women doing all of this work for men? Like how can they be preparing lunches and all of the things that I talked about earlier? It is because of heterosexuality. And it's not only, you know, a bad thing for women, let's say. No, it contributes to capitalism, not only for patriarchy, but capitalism needs compulsory heterosexuality to exist because if there is there's no one doing the cooking, the cleaning, the reproductive work, productive work, in the factories and in the offices, it wouldn't exist. Like domestic labor is what allows the system to exist and men to have power and nature to be destroyed. So there's this really great essay which is in Spanish by Karina Vergara Sanchez, which is a really great lesbo-feminist theorist. Which I mean, I could like share the link, but I don't know if because it's in Spanish. But basically, it talks about how compulsory heterosexuality is also the base of capitalism that works together with capitalism and capitalism and patriarchy. So yes, we related to not only patriarchy but also to capitalism and colonialism and so on. It's more like connected to everything, but of course it has to be thought as a political structure more than something that sometimes happens to lesbian women and that makes their lives difficult. No, it's something that affects every woman and makes them be a part of the capitalist system, basically.
Yes, I think the word we say here is like it's the cornerstone. If you don't have heterosexuality as an institution, nothing else works. I completely agree with
Mhm.
that. So, to finish, I suppose what I want to ask is, if a woman is saying that she would like to be a lesbian but feel that she can't, but she wants to, what would you say to her? Like, do you believe that that sexuality is immutable, fixed? Can we change? Can a woman who thought of herself as heterosexual become a lesbian? Is that something that is possible for in your mind?
Um, yes, totally, but also it's been pretty rocky lately because like there's women who say that, and of course I mean, what I think is that it's a positive thing to hear from other women, but um what I would say is that I would like inquire more things like why do you feel like that and things like that, because sometimes it can begin, of course, because of a disappointment, uh because of a recent like horrible breakup uh with a boyfriend or something like that. uh but basically what I would say is it's not like, yes, of course, like uh you can be a lesbian this immediate minute. But instead, I would, like try to share what building a life with women could be like. Um, because I do think that sometimes it's seen as something like, okay, then I want to be a lesbian, and to be a lesbian, I just have to have a girlfriend, and that's it.
Mhm.
course, not it's more complex than that, because even if we only think about it as a sexual orientation, it can never be like that. I would say it's more because it's not like, okay, I'm a normal person in society, and then I just sometimes I have relationships with women. It's
Mhm.
pretty complex, and it's a way that you basically live. It's the way that you relate to other women, because even if it's just seen as a sexual orientation, it's really conflictive to patriarchy, because you have a woman that is not interested sexually or romantically um, to men. She's not interested at all. So how are you going to include her in patriarchy? And of course, patriarchy has its ways, because even you can still have a father and friends, and of course, heterosexuality, it's not just having a boyfriend.
Mhm.
But basically, like, going back to the question, I would share what building a community with women could be like. Um, because sometimes it just happens. Like, I do feel like um, there's this inclination that when women start decentering men of their lives, they start noticing. I mean, not that right away that they can have a relationship with another woman, but all the different possibilities that being with women can have.
Mhm.
I would say it just comes naturally in a way, like this other form of life. So it can start not only, like, of course, the first step is leaving men behind, but also the way you see yourself, the way you relate to other women, um, the way that like, even your interests, what you think you like, all of these things that have to be, um, removed or placed in a way. So yes, it has to be um more of like, okay, let's continue to explore, this other alternative. But I would say I would be also be careful, because women are not just like another alternative that you can run to when you are tired of men. We
Yeah.
can be like the primary option, and I think that's where some women get lost. But of course, I would welcome them, and like, make them explore what they're feeling right now, and where that rejection to men comes from, really. So
Mhm.
yes.
Yes. Yeah, I really enjoy listening to your response because it is complex and deep, and because very often I know the term choose to be a lesbian is misunderstood as exactly what you say. This doesn't work, so now I'm going to take that and I'm going to have sex with women, which makes me a lesbian. And what you describe is something that is much deeper emotionally, but also, as we were talking right at the beginning about women who are leaving and decentering men, you said, what next? And to me, I have the same experience of what you say about when you decenter men, it's possible that you see women differently. In fact, it's possible that you start seeing women for the first time properly, as
Hmm.
equal as human being, as um, and um, and yes, like the way it develops or can develop is much more than just a sexual orientation. In the same way that heterosexuality is much more than just a sexual orientation, it's an oppression. Therefore, yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about this and the way you really take the time to go in depth in this because of the way that we are attacked as being shallow. In fact, women who choose lesbianism just swap because they're disappointed, and this is not really what we are saying at all, and never have. So thank you for that really, really great response. We're going to close very soon. Is there anything in all that we've discussed that, anything that we have left out, anything that you would like to say that I haven't asked you, anything that, you want to leave the listeners with?
I would just say that um, also, as even if lesbian communities try to be, as inclusive as they can, um, there is some point of views that are always left behind, and I do think that we have to be open. Of course, I don't mean like letting men in or anything like that. I mean more like really trying to listen to um, those who have an anti-colonialist perspective and an anti-racist perspective, and also a like anti-speciesist perspective, because we know that men have the control of everything, and basically the world is the king because of them. But we I do think that we focus a lot of on humans, and we have to be more open than that, and we also have to see how capitalism and patriarchy are affecting other forms of life. And sometimes I don't see that there is really that no, it's not the perspectives are not really welcoming. So I do think that we have to be very open to women that are talking about the damage to other species and to other people that to other women that are not immediately next to us, women of color, and animals as well, and disabled women, a lot of things that we are not considering. I have when I started to go to these discussion groups and to these workshops, one woman once said, like, why are we asking ourselves why there isn't, for example, like a trans woman here? Why aren't we asking ourselves instead why there isn't an indigenous woman here?
Mhm.
Like things that are not immediately next to us, but that we have to keep considering. So I would say, like keep an open eye for those other perspectives that um, that that have to be considered as well.
Yes, and very often these perspectives are silenced or unable to or not given a platform. So yes, I really hear what you're saying. Thank you so much, Daniela. That was a really interesting and in-depth conversation, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening and spending this time with us. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, order the book, like the episode, leave a review, share it with a woman that might find it valuable. If you have any thoughts or questions, we'd like to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or connect with us on social media. Until the next episode, take care, stay curious, stay away from men, and see you next time.